Hello, everyone. Welcome to the California Legislative Update, what happens next here at the Almond Board of California Conference. Today, I'm lucky to have with me three wonderful gentlemen who are huge advocates on behalf of the California almond industry and agriculture. First, we have Dennis Albiani of California Advocates. We also have Assemblymember Heath Flora of 12th Assembly District with us today, as well as Assemblymember Adam Gray of the 21st Assembly District. Welcome, gentlemen. I'd like to
Thank
start
you
out
for
today's
inviting us.
panel. Very welcome. I'd like to start out today's panel by quickly introducing the Almond Alliance. I'll say a couple minutes here. We are the advocacy trade organization for the California almond industry. We're a member-based organization that advocates for you both on the state, federal, and local level. Today's discussion is going to be a legislative update and what to expect in 2021, as well as a brief recap of this year. I'm excited about the discussion and would really like to start off with Dennis Albiani of California Advocates. Dennis, again, thanks for being here today. And I was just hoping that you could start off with some quick highlights from this last legislative session.
Sure, thank you, Elaine. So the session started out as any normal session would. 2,300 bills introduced. There was a budget surplus, which is unique in California. And there were lots of plans on how we're going to invest for the future and address those issues. Well, that quickly came to a halt in end of February and beginning of March when COVID hit the institution and they really shrunk the expectations. The goal was to focus on four main issues: COVID, the budget, homelessness, as well as the wildfires, the liability, excuse me. So as they went, they were really trying to narrow the year down. Now they did. There was about 600 bills that they narrowed it down to, of which about 428 of those went to the governor. So it was there. But again, their definition of narrowing might be a little bit more broad than what the almond growers and allied industry partners would think. But they did focus on that. And so we started one of the real big issues we saw quite a bit of, which was employers. How are we going to address COVID and some of those issues? Well, many of the more progressive labor groups took advantage of the COVID opportunities and pushed a lot of the agenda to which they would not have been acceptable in normal times and advanced that. And so there were proposals on hazard pay. There were proposals on trying to make sure that how you transport workers, very aggressive anti-H2A program amendments in California that would have hurt those areas. So we spent a lot of time on the labor issues and working and pushing back on those. Another area that has continued to get a lot of attention, unfortunately for this administration, is pesticides. There were issues on, banning glyphosate, and that was done administratively for fumigants. But then they've come up with pellet applications of chlorpyrifos. Excuse me, banning glyphosate. That was not done. My apologies. Glyphosate was intended to be banned. Then it was. Then they narrowed that down to be used on schools, and then chlorpyrifos. Chlorpyrifos became an issue that is banned as a fumigant, and there was a pellet application which they addressed and said there has to be quarterly reporting. Applicator safety continues to be an issue. Second generation anticoagulants were set to be essentially banned. We're able to maintain a food and food processing and agriculture exemption in those bills, but it did show quite a bit of attention on pesticides. Then we also spent significant time on carbon and climate change. The cap and trade program had challenges in its funding, so that was narrowed down, but we definitely laid a foundation for future efforts in that area that I think Mr. Flora will discuss. So those are some of the basic issues, the policy issues. And then we also discussed things as far as the budget going forward. And there was always intentions that the budget would, because of COVID, would be dramatically restricted. Early indications for next year show that the budget has generally recovered for at least this year due to the strong capital gains, but that will continue to be a challenge as we go forward. So those are some of the key issues we worked on this year, and glad to further discuss in Q&A.
Thank you, Dennis. I'm just curious what you consider, in addition to what you said, any of the biggest wins or losses of the year for the agricultural industry.
Well, I think we're able to hold off some of the really aggressive labor issues, although they've continued to permeate throughout the entire industry and, frankly, all employers. But we're able to get pushback on this hazard pay concept that was brought forward in press releases, and people continue to talk about it. We sat down on behalf of the Almond Alliance with the assembly member who was contemplating introducing that legislation. We talked through the challenges with it. How would you implement it? How would you address it? Why would it be justified for essential workers and not other workers that were going through? And so that was an issue that we were successful in pushing back and pushing back on. I would also say I think there was we were able to keep the cap and trade funding that existed focused on the safe drinking water, and that affects nitrates and fertilizers as well as animal agriculture, and keep that funded as a priority, even with the reduced funding in the cap and trade program. And then, like I said, I did bring up the able to get, because of food safety and some of the other challenges, the anticoagulant legislation, keep that the food safety, the food processing and agricultural exemption in those bills.
Great. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. That was a great summary. And I'm going to switch over to Assemblymember Flora now. And I just wanted you to give us kind of a brief overview on how COVID's impacted the legislature and how things are getting done, operations, and give us a little snapshot of that, please.
Well, thank you, Elaine, Dennis, Adam. Always good to see all of you. And I won't lie, I'm sick and tired of seeing everybody through a computer screen. It's time to start meeting in person. So I'm really looking forward to getting life back to somewhat normal. But I think this is one of the biggest issues with COVID, to be quite honest with you. My entire relationship, my entire ability to do my job in Sacramento is based on relationships. There's only one vote, and it's mine. They need 40 other people to actually come along with you and vote with you on whatever the subject matter may be, 40 or 54, depending on if it's a tax or a fee. That is really challenging to do in this time of COVID. It's really challenging to build relationships through a computer screen. It's really challenging to meet with third house folks like yourselves on the lobbying side of it to discuss issues. Because when you're looking at a computer screen, there may be a delay. There may be a personality, a trait that you're not picking up on. There may be a conversation that needs to be had based on like a human interaction. I think COVID has absolutely devastated our ability to do our jobs. And it's frustrating that we continue to 9 months into this COVID issue that we're still really back to square one. We really haven't seen a solution. And yet we're still doing what we've done. And there's been no progress. And last time I checked, the definition of insanity was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I really think that we as an industry, we as legislators, for the state of California's sake, need to get back to that building and get back to work, meeting with each other, meeting with third house folks, sitting down in our offices, having a cup of coffee, and really discussing those issues. Because I'm sorry, looking at each other through a computer screen is no substitute for meeting face to face. So it's absolutely changed how we do our job and the dynamic within the legislator. And even as the minority floor leader, it's really challenging to get accurate vote counts, to know where certain bills are, because it's a lot harder to get people to be truthful with you, quite frankly, on where they're at. When you can look somebody in the eye and say, hey, are you with me? It's a lot harder to go back on your word as opposed to doing it through a computer screen. And we saw this time and time again where it's just challenging to do it during this COVID era. But I'm excited about this next year. I think the first couple months are going to be sort of the same old. But hopefully when we start getting into February, March, we can see some changes and really start opening back up. But it has been a huge challenge for sure.
No, thank you for that perspective. I think it's an important one, and many people are sharing that frustration of not being able to have those conversations in the building and getting back to the way it was in terms of how we do business. I want to talk about quickly a carbon sequestration bill that you authored that has been something in the almond industry folks have been talking about for a long time. And you actually took it and you put it in a bill. And due to COVID, there was obviously delays in what's going to happen with this bill. But if you could just briefly talk about the bill and what you see happening in 2021 and how we as an industry could be helpful.
So carbon sequestration is not something that I thought that I was going to be really engaged in when I first got elected. I mean, it's one of those kind of weird things that not a lot of people truly understand. But kind of my first year when we went into cap and trade, and it's kind of been built a career kind of on environmental protections for within the ag community. It's been very curious to me why certain local governments or of our urban centers can get credit for planting certain trees for certain vegetation and meet these carbon sequestration goals because of the vegetation they're planting. But our growers plant roughly 130 trees to the acre, but we get no credits for that. There is no offset for that. So it was a discussion that we've had. And I think with the Alliance's help, with Dennis's help, we've ripped off some Band-Aids on this subject. And I'm excited to see where it goes. It'll be fascinating to see if the environmental justice community, I mean, we have a lot of friends on the environmental side that we can work together very, very well with. There is also an aspect of that particular group, the environmental justice side of the group, that doesn't want to see ag win on anything and that are going to be fighting very, very hard to make sure that we do not get these carbon sequestration credits that I quite frankly think we deserve. Ag right now, each one of our growers are some of the best environmentalists we could ever ask for because we know, I mean, my family came here in the 20s. It's the same dirt. We're farming the same piece of property. We're not going to do anything to mess it up. Quite frankly, we're going to do everything we can to sustain that, but we need to get the credits for that. And so I think for us as an ag community, the more that we get our story out, the more that we educate, quite frankly, the environmental justice community on what our practices are, I think the more open they are to this conversation. But there is absolutely no reason in my mind that we can't at least get credits for planting trees that we plant on our own property. So going into 2021, it'll be interesting because we did kind of put the bill on ice because of COVID. We were asked to. Did like Dennis mentioned earlier, there's a lot of other bills that went through that I think were at the very best loosely connected to COVID, which I think is a stretch. Nonetheless, we felt like we did our part with this particular bill, but I'm excited to reintroduce it. I'm excited to open up the conversations again, and we'll see what happens. But it is going to be one of our top priorities this year to see if we can't actually make this happen.
Wonderful. Well, we will work with you in any way possible because this is an important bill and one that I think is long overdue. So thank you for authoring that bill. Assemblymember Gray, we're going to head over your way here and was wondering if you could please speak to the political climate post-COVID and how it's impacted agriculture, and then also speak to any state election impacts to agriculture that you saw this year as well.
Yeah, well, thank you. And thanks again for inviting me to be part of this discussion today. It's good to see both Dennis and Heath, Elaine, and nice to visit with you on these issues. COVID has had significant impact in agriculture because of the lack of attention to essential workforces by the state, frankly. You know, we started out this journey through this public health crisis earlier in the year, and the initial response by California, I think arguably was a pretty good one. You know, while COVID was increasing the spread in states like New York, Californians from all over the Central Valley, Los Angeles, San Francisco managed to stay home and flatten the curve. That's the end of what I think was the good response by the state of California to COVID. Since then, I think we've seen the demonizing of essential workforces like agriculture. Instead of, while we've seen resources flow to our urban communities as far as PPE and other supplies, we've seen blame head the way of Central Valley communities like my district, where we're continuing to do the work each and every day to make sure we can put food on the table of all Californians. And rather than see the state step in and make sure that when we have hot spots and virus spread, the state's right there with their mobile task force to provide testing and other supplies. Instead, we've seen employers up and down the state get blamed as if they don't care for their own employees. And so it's been a difficult year, to say the least, and I don't have to tell the people watching this interview, they've experienced it firsthand. I think going forward into next year, we need to raise these issues. It's funny, the state, as part of their color-coded tier system, actually implemented an equity metric. And that equity metric is meant to say to a county, you cannot go back into a better colored tier just because a majority of your county is doing well. If there are disadvantaged communities in your county not doing well, you need to address that. And I think we need a similar equity metric applied at the state level. Of course, the state applied this to all the counties, but forgot to apply it to themselves. And we need that type of metric where we say, where are our essential workforces who are out there doing this tough work, putting themselves at risk, both employees and employers, and how do we best support them by bringing in adequate testing and resources? Until we get that change in attitude, I think we'll be heading the wrong direction in Sacramento. And that's best displayed, frankly, at the end of session. And my colleague, Mr. Floor, already mentioned this. Here we are at the end of session pushing, significant bills that not only don't help employers, employees, and essential workforces, but actually create additional layers of costs amidst an economic recession. And so just the fact that we were debating those measures and, as Dennis said earlier, we were able to defeat, I think, some critical bills that would have created a great deal of hardship. But I'm sure those same authors and those same colleagues will be back next year trying to push that legislation. And we need to be prepared to tell this story and ensure that California heads in the right direction.
Thank you. Thank you for your perspective on that. And I'm going to ask you again your perspective, another perspective question on what you think agriculture's biggest challenges are going to be in the next 12 months at the Capitol and at the state.
I think the biggest challenge to agriculture going forward this next year is going to be the implementation of SGMA at the time that we're dealing with an economic recession and a public health crisis. There is definitely a tone-deaf response to the legislature by both the Water Board, the administration. We're not realizing that we need to hit the pause button in some of these regulatory spaces amidst an economic crisis so that we can actually experience an economic recovery, get stable footing, and then at that point figure out how to move forward together.
Thank you. I just can't say enough how much I appreciate the three of you because you are huge advocates, not just for agriculture, but you recognize that the economy of the Central Valley is ag-based. And that's the thing that I always boggles my mind, that rural California and the economics of the Central Valley are sometimes ignored with blanket policies that just don't fit in this region. And so I always appreciate your perspective and your voice. That being said, and your work, your hard work, tireless work. And for those watching, you can't imagine how much work these three gentlemen have done to prevent bad policies and laws from happening that you'll never know about because they handled in in their own worlds, specific to the legislature and to the state. So given this, I'd just like to ask you if you could just provide some insight on how can we as an industry, the almond industry, um, help you in the work that you do, and how can we just be in general more impactful? What should we be doing again to help our voice be heard and help you in advocating for not just almonds but agriculture and an ag-based economy?
Well, the two legislators can talk. They're the professionals and they know exactly how to work with that. But from an advocate standpoint, one thing I would say is one of the great things is we're Central Valley and we run from Bakersfield to Chico. But that's also a negative because there's only maybe 10, 12 legislators in that band. So but we do market all over the state. We have many entities have offices in other areas. And so if you have a salesperson, a packaging office, whoever you buy packaging from, they all need to be engaging directly with our legislators. We have Heath and Adam are outstanding. They're engaged. They're bringing legislators from the Bay Area over to tours. Just had one a couple weeks ago where both of them came to. We've been and coordinated. And so those are the types of opportunities. So I would say one is know your legislator. Two, any supplier, any affiliated industry that you work with that's outside of that band of Bakersfield to Chico, try to build relationships there. Try to know those legislators, have them call and bring them over and see what the industry is doing. We also work with ports, we work with other areas. So make sure that the entities that represent the port areas, is what we do quite a bit, is work on those folks. And so I would recommend just building any relationship you have, linking that to a legislative interaction if you can. And then I'll kick it over to the two legislators for their points.
Assemblymember Gray?
I was just going to add to that and say, I think it's critical that you make your problems a legislator's problems. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of cynicism about the responsiveness of elected officials to their constituents. And a lot of people feel like their voice isn't heard. Nobody's thinking about what they're doing. And the reality is legislators are pretty responsive. Every single legislator, Mr. Flora, myself, and others, has to get reelected. And they're out there working to make sure that their constituents are supporting them. And when you're facing issues post the passage of a bad law, when those results of that law are affecting your business and your livelihood and your daily life, you got to make sure everybody's aware of it. Education just can't stop even in times when we fail to stop a bad bill, because that education sets the foundation for change and it lets legislators know. And to Dennis's point, I think too often we think of advocacy for agriculture just in rural communities like Merced County or Stanislaus County. But the reality is legislators up and down the state benefit from the ag economy. Their constituents benefit from the ag economy, and we need to make them aware of that. We have a fresh couple of legislators coming in, a handful of brand new names from all over the state, and we can't assume that they understand these things. We have to make sure go out and spell it out for them. That's what the work that Dennis does. That's the work Keith and I will do. But it's important that those of you out there communicate with your peers in the agricultural industry up and down the state, as well as your business partners that benefit from agriculture in urban communities, and make sure that we're doing that education piece. I know it's tiring. It's the last thing you want to hear when you're running a business, you're employing folks, but we need to all do that work together if we're going to be effective in protecting agriculture going forward.
I think that that's absolutely right. There's not a lot of, I don't know, more information that I can add, with the exception of it comes down to simple math. Like there's 80 assembly members in the state of California. We all represent roughly 500,000 people, which means the majority of our colleagues come from some very urban centers. If we are just talking to each other, if Adam and I are only talking to each other, we agree on pretty much everything. Well, then that message isn't getting out. So it's our job to get out there, to bring our Bay Area and Southern California colleagues to the Central Valley. And keep in mind, this is not a partisan issue. I mean, I've got Republican friends that have no clue what it means to be a Central Valley legislator or a farmer or a grower. They're in banking, they're in finance, which are great industries. That's just their world that they live in. So when you have a pesticide issue, yeah, it may seem like a great idea when it's being presented in a way that our friends present certain types of legislation to them to get their buy-in. Well, guess what? It's devastating to us. So we have to do a better job of really getting out there as an industry, and not just the almond industry. I think the almond industry, I know for a fact that the almond industry is leading the way in this. There's a few other, I mean, the dairymen are doing a great job. The cattlemen are doing a great job as well. There's a few others in the ag world that are really, really stepping up their game, which is incredibly exciting. But when Adam and I kicked down the door of one of our colleagues, or in this case, look through a video screen at them, hopefully we get back to kicking down their door. And we turn around and we're saying this is a huge, huge issue, and there's nobody behind us. They're going, really not that big of a deal because the ag community is not here with you. So it's this balance of how do we, as a community, understand that politics needs to become an integral part of your business plan at this point. Just like everything else that we do, it really needs to become a line item in your business model is to engage politically. It's incredibly important. I can tell you right now, this was not a career path that I thought I was going to go down. I thought I was going to be a firefighter. I thought I was going to farm with the family. That's what I thought I was going to do. But I am so proud to do what I do now, to help educate both our friends in Sacramento about what it means to be a Central Valley farmer, as well as educating the Central Valley farmers on what it means to be a Sacramento legislator. We have to understand each other's issues, and we can only do that if we are engaged. Labor is masters at this. Every single day pre-COVID, labor was in there with teams, with just teams of people pushing their agenda. I think there is an offshoot that ag needs to do with that as well. We have to get our voices heard because we as an ag community have nothing to be ashamed of. We have a lot to be proud of, and we have to control our story. Otherwise, the narrative that will be spun will not be accurate. So I'm encouraged because I think in the last 4 years, it's 4 times better, and we have a long ways to go, but it's getting significantly better. So I'm encouraged by this. The future is very bright for California ag.
Thank you. Thank you for those great comments. And I was just going to ask each of you to provide some closing comments, some closing thoughts, anything that you want to share with those that are watching this panel. And then you're used to thinking on your feet, so I'm going to throw something at you as well, which is your favorite almond food, dish, drink, whatever that looks like. So, Dennis, I'm going to put you on the hot spot. Any closing comments, and then we'll go to Assemblymember Gray and Assemblymember Flora.
No, I think Heath did bring something up that I think we did not enhance enough, and that is engaging in political action. Contributing to the Almond Alliance PAC is a key element to help build that structure. And then when they invite folks over to a tour, we can hold an industry dinner for them and help support those political action and those candidates. And so I think that's a great way to open doors, great way to build those relationships. So that's one thing I would encourage, and I think Heath brought up. I'd also go with, I think you got to go with the C's almond squares. They're chocolate and almond with caramel. You can't beat that one. So I'm a C's guy.
Great. Assemblymember Gray, any closing comments?
Yeah, well, I'll just say thank you to everyone out there. Those of you who are watching this are probably the folks that are more involved than less, supporting the industry, working with the association, and your work's appreciated because it helps Heath and I when we're up in Sacramento fighting for agriculture. But just ask you to continue that advocacy, keep an open mind to what we're saying here about working with folks up and down the state, and call on us, both Heath and I, to work together to help you organize top to bottom the state so that we can be more effective advocates on your behalf in Sacramento. As far as my favorite almonds, I have a soft spot for chocolate almonds, although I like them just the same, plain and old fashioned, but I got a soft spot for chocolate almonds, particularly this time of year. So as we head into the holidays, I know we're all going to do a little eating, probably more than we should. Hopefully enjoy a little drinking, but everyone have a great holiday. Thank you for including me on this interview. It's good to see everyone, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Assemblymember Gray. Thank you very much. Assemblymember Flora.
No, it's I'll just echo my colleague Adam's statements on it's so important that each and every one of you stay engaged. I cannot express that enough, because our jobs is to represent each and every one of you. My job is to be your voice in Sacramento. So when there are issues, I would just beg that you contact us, express how you're feeling, good and bad, quite frankly, because it may be my vote. It's my job to hit that red or green button, but I need to know how you want me to vote, because it's your district, it's your livelihoods as well. So you as an industry, staying engaged is incredibly valuable. It's insanely important, because if we are not, our narrative will be lost. And so I am encouraged, because there is a lot of really good women, a lot of really good men that are fighting for you. And that is incredibly exciting. We need to keep that going. And that is why, I'm an optimist by nature. It is not easy to do business in the state of California, but I do think that our narrative is changing because of the conversations that we've had, because of some of the legislation that we have been able to kill, because of advocacy, because we are able to control our narrative. And I'm going to probably get myself in a little bit of trouble here with some folks, but you can't beat wasabi and soy. It's where I'm at.
Thank you.
So,
well, I would just like to thank everybody for watching this panel, and just say that we, as the Trade Association for the Industry, will continue to work with these gentlemen and many more to advocate on behalf of the industry, our interests. The issues that we face are ever changing and complex. This was a state perspective, but we also have the federal and local at times. And so I just thank you for your engagement. As Assemblymember Gray said, many of you watching this are already engaged, but we need you to bring your peers along with you. We need more voices. We need more participation. We need more support. I do ask that you get engaged. One place to do so is the Almond Festival in 2021. We'll be blasting out the date for you to be aware. And it's an opportunity for you to have a structured way to engage with your elected officials at the Capitol, as well as the secretaries of the agencies that impact and make decisions daily on the work that will impact the work that you do. And then I just want to say also, as Dennis had mentioned earlier, the stronger our industry pack is, the stronger I think our association is. And so encourage you to be involved in PAC events as well. So with that, I want to thank you again, gentlemen, for taking time out of your schedule to talk at the Almond Conference. And for everyone else out there, I just want to ask you to, again, participate and enjoy the rest of the Almond Conference. Contact the Almond Alliance with any questions you have regarding this panel. Thank you very much, and have a great conference.